Hello, everyone. Welcome to the NFL Week 11 edition of the Player Prop Countdown, where I rank my top 10 favorite player props for Week 11 of the NFL season. We are now 1 week into the second half of the season, and as I talked about earlier this week on the road to 272, Week 10 was a tough one, not only for my sides and total bets, but for the player props as well. Not only, was it a 4-6 week? I had some heartbreakers. Just to recap a few tough ones that I lost. CJ Stroud under 230.5 pass yards. I think he finished with 232. So that went 3 yards over. Nick Folk over 1.5 field goals made. He was 100% on field goals heading into the week. He had 2 attempts. One was missed, and I think it was less than 50 yards. I think it was a 44-yard field goal. So that lost because he missed that field goal. And then Alvin Kamara over 111.5 rushing and receiving yards. He finished with 109. That was 3 yards short, and he dropped what would have been like a 30-yard gain at the very least late in the game, which would have sealed that. So right there, those that's what sports betting is. You get 3 bad beats, 3 coin flip plays go against you, and all of a sudden, instead of being, all 3 of those go my way, I'm sitting at 7-3. Instead, I'm at 4-6, down. What was my record here? Down 2.5 units on the week. I win one of those 3. I'm at 5-5, and it's still a losing week, but only barely. Also, I took Evan Ingram as a touchdown scorer, and then the next day, Trevor Lawrence got ruled out, and Mac Jones got put in. I should have known that in advance, I guess, but that certainly hurt my chances there with that bet. That takes my season-to-date record heading into Week 11 to 48, 51, and 1 for minus 3.3 units. As I said in the road to 272 earlier this week, my goal, both for that and for the player prop countdown, is to finish the week, or the season, profitable, I should say. Yeah, we're down 3.3 units, but it's certainly not over yet. Still plenty of football left to bet on. Before I get into my top 10 player props for Week 11, I want to answer a question that was sent to me. And by the way, if anyone ever has any questions that they want me to answer on the podcast, you can DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open. You can tweet at me. You can leave a comment in the comment section below on YouTube, which, by the way, please subscribe to Bacon Bets Podcast on YouTube. This question was sent to me by, it goes by Stanley Yelnats on Twitter, but it's at Cody, 4_ and Smith. He says, do you ever take into account the public percentages? Feels like specifically primetime games where the public is heavy on a team and it will typically go against them. He has in brackets, I actually have no stats to support that. Whether you do or not, I would love to know your thoughts on fading the public. Yes, this is something that is pretty popular on sports betting Twitter. A lot of people will at least factor into what side they're on for a handicap based on public splits. And what they mean by public splits are, you see these tweets all the time, people who run marketing for sports books and have connections with sports books. They'll say 67% of the money are on the Bills minus 2.5, or they'll say the sports books need the Colts to cover in tonight's primetime game because all the money's on the other side. I do not take that into consideration for a few reasons. Number one, the public wins. I know Stanley Yelnats, a.k.a. Cody Smith, has said that he's noticed in primetime games, anecdotally, that the sharp side has won in primetime games this season. I don't have numbers to back that up either. I would say typically that has been right, at least in recent weeks, but that's kind of a small sample size. And I actually think overall for the NFL season, I actually think the quote-unquote public side has actually done pretty well this season, especially the past handful of weeks. So yeah, the public wins. So if you're going to always bet against the public, you are going to lose. It's not as easy as that. And don't forget, sports books, when they go against the public, which they do, sports books will side with sharps more often than not, which is also a myth. You also hear the myth, which I've said in the past, and I've learned that this has not been the case. The myth that sports books actually want 50% of action on both sides. That's actually not true. They'll typically lean toward what they think the sharp side is based on where pro bettors are placing their bets. Don't forget that when the sports books are technically fading the public, they're getting it at plus 110 odds. You, as the bettor, because you are paying VIG, are paying minus 110. Generally, for a normal spread bet, it'd be minus 110. Obviously, that differs. But regardless, you are paying a VIG. So even if you're on the same side as the sports book, you're paying it at minus 110. The sportsbook's getting it at plus 110. So yeah, if you were on the sportsbook side every single time and you got plus 110 odds on a normal spread, then yeah, it'd be a profitable strategy. But unfortunately, that's not the way it works. So if you only follow the sportsbook side, the sportsbook's going to win because they're getting those bets at plus 110 based on the VIG. You're going to lose long term because you're getting it at minus 110 or whatever the juice ends up being. The third reason I would say why I don't use those numbers is that I don't think they are necessarily reliable. Let's say someone says 80% of the money is on the Bills. It's like, okay, at what number? How much of that 80% was on Bills when they were at minus 2.5? Now they're at minus 2. So what percentage? Because that's a big difference. If these bettors are getting it at minus 2 or minus 2.5, it's a big difference if they got it at minus 2.5, minus 110, or minus 2.5, minus 105. You can't really just add all percentages for what side of public and what side the sharp is on just Bills minus 2, because we know, as you know, if you watch the spread change throughout the week, it's very rarely at exactly minus 2, and I'm just using this number as an example, minus 2, minus 110 the entire week. It's fluctuates up. It'll be minus 2, minus 115. It might go down to minus 1.5. So when you're saying 80% of the money is on the Bills, at Bills at what number? What about when it was at Bills minus 1.5? Was 80% of the money on the Bills then? Is that just an accumulation of all the different times, all the different spreads, all the different VIGs? So the kind of short answer is no. I don't use that. Now, I will say that I do, when I find out that I'm on the quote-unquote sharp side, I do feel better about my bet. Whether I should or shouldn't is probably up for debate. I probably should look at it like it doesn't matter. But I'd be lying if I said, if I have a bet on a game and then I read a tweet an hour before kickoff that I'm on the same side that the sportsbooks need. I feel better about my bet than I do when I see I'm on the opposite side as the sportsbooks need. But I don't look at those things before I place my bet. And I don't agree with people who do. And also, if you look at like the third-party websites and where they're getting their data, they're getting their data from different sportsbooks. So one sportsbook might have a partnership with Caesars, and that sportsbook might have 80% on one side. Another sportsbook might be getting their data from FanDuel, and FanDuel has 60% on that side. So it's also going to be different data depending on what website you look at. So long answer short, a lot of that data is unreliable. And even if you do follow that data, don't forget, this is the most key part. When you are betting on the same side of a sportsbook, you're betting at a minus 110. The sportsbook is getting it at plus 110 because the VIG, and the VIG makes all the difference in the world. So that is why I'm not for necessarily looking at those numbers or using them in my handicapping process whatsoever. So with that being said, if you want to ask me questions, tweet at me, DM me, and I'll answer as many as I can on this podcast. I'll answer them on whatever episode I record most recently after I get the question. All right, let's get into my player props for this week. I did not make a DFS lineup this week. My DFS lineup was so bad it was embarrassing. If someone really wants my DFS play, I am going to make a lineup probably a little bit later in the week. You can DM me. I'll tell you who I'm on. But for the most part, if I'm taking an over on a player prop, I probably like that player in a DFS lineup. So I don't have a DFS lineup for this week, at least not yet. My DFS lineups have sucked all season. I think last week, how many players are in a lineup? Like 8? If there's 8 players in the lineup, I had the little ice emoji next to 6 of them. Not good. You never want to see that. All right, let's get into my top 10 player props for week 11 of the NFL season. Don't have my graphics ready for some reason. But I'm going to start with, and people are going to be surprised by this, because a lot of people think I might be fading him. I even said today I am now going to lose my Colts bet because Anthony Richardson was in, but guess what? I'm actually going to bet on him for my player prop. My number 10 player prop of the week, Anthony Richardson to go over 177.5 pass yards at minus 115. I'm going to buy low a little bit on Anthony Richardson. How much did he learn in his 2 weeks he watched Flacco? I don't know. I think he might be a little bit better than what people expect. And actually, don't forget, Anthony Richardson, in some of his starts, and I can't believe I'm defending Anthony Richardson because I've done nothing but shit on the guy the past 2 months. But in his recent starts before he got benched, he was actually taking on some good defenses. He did not have good matchups. He took on the Texans, who have a very good secondary, lowest completion percentage in the NFL. The Dolphins, who have an underrated secondary. The Bears, who have arguably the best secondary in the NFL. The Packers, who have a pretty good secondary. And then the Houston, the first time, who have a very, very good secondary. He has not got the chance to play against one bad secondary so far this NFL season. Now he's taken on the Jets, who had a good secondary, but as I talked about in the road to 272, the Jets defense has completely fallen apart. They've allowed 6.2 yards per pass attempt over their last 3 games. Dead last in opponent EPA since they fired Robert Saleh. It's like 27th in opponent success rate since they fired Robert Saleh. And with the Jets being favored, I mean, I like the Colts to cover here, but with the Jets being favored, if those odds do remain true, that could lead to a negative game script. That could lead to Anthony Richardson throwing the ball more. So might come as a shocker, but I actually like Anthony Richardson to go over his passing props total. It's 177.5. That's very low for a quarterback. I'm gonna kind of zig instead of zag here in this one. Anthony Richardson over 177.5 pass yards at -115. Another quarterback I can't believe I'm betting on, but this is the state we're in here in Week 11. Russell Wilson. Not over his passing yards total. I'll take over 29.5 pass attempts at -128. The Steelers taking on the Ravens. Of course, one of my favorite prop bets all season long has been to take the over on pass yards for whatever quarterback is playing against the Steelers. I think the market, at least in pass yards, has adjusted a little bit. I didn't love the number that was posted for Russell Wilson. What I do like is for him to have at least 30 pass attempts, though. Few reasons. Number one, negative game script once again, and this is why I was generally betting on quarterback over pass yards. If the Ravens get up, and they are favored in this game, 3-point favorites, the Steelers are going to have to throw the ball more often. Number two, Ravens' strong run defense. If they put the Steelers in second long and third and long situations, those are passing downs. Those are downs where the Steelers are going to have to throw the football. And number three, Russell Wilson in his 3 starts does have attempts of 29, 28, and 28. And in those games, it called for passing plays a lot less than I think this game, based on the script, will call for. And he only needs, 1 more attempt, 2 more attempts than he's had in these games. And this bet is going to hit. So don't have a ton of confidence in his passing yards or completions. I do think based on the way the Ravens play, good run defense, bad secondary, good offense, which would give them the lead at some point. I think all of that is an ingredient for Russell Wilson to throw just a tad more than he has in his recent starts. And once again, he has pass attempts of 29, 28, 28. We only need him to reach 30 for this bet to hit on Sunday. So Russell Wilson over 29.5 pass attempts at -128. Sunday, we are going to go to the Dolphins against the Raiders, and this is a popular bet this past Monday night. I didn't get in on it. It didn't hit for most people, but I'm going to bet on this now. And it is Devon Achane. Is it Achane or Achane? Regardless. That speedy little fucker in the Dolphins' backfield. I'm going to take him over 35.5 receiving yards at -115. He has been used as a receiver quite often since Tua has been back at quarterback for the Dolphins. In his 3 games since Tua has been back, he has targets of 8, 8, and 5. He has receptions of 6, 8, and 5. If a wide receiver was targeted 8, 8, and 5 in 3 games and called in 6, 8, and 5 receptions, his receiving yards total would not be 35.5. I actually find it surprising his rushing plus receiving yards number is like 105. But he hasn't actually run the ball a ton. Only like 12 attempts last game. I think around that the game before. He's actually been used just as much as a pass-catching back as he is actually a runner of the football. So I like him to go over 35.5 receiving yards against a Raiders defense that is depleted. A Raiders team that I do not think is going to look good whatsoever this week. So I think he has a big game. Also, the first 2 starts with Tua back, he had like over 50 yards receiving. I think only like 15 this past week. The Rams kept him in check, but I have a lot more faith he can kind of break a long one here against the Raiders. So I'll go Achane over 35.5 receiving yards at -115. Number 7 player prop of the week. This is my Thursday night play. Now, there's a few different ways that I thought about going on Thursday Night Football. I thought about taking Jaden Daniels under his passing yards total because of how well the Eagles secondary has been playing lately. The issue with that is I also think the Eagles are going to win this game by a lot, so I think Jaden Daniels is going to have to throw a lot more in the second half, so I stayed away from that. I did think about going Saquon Barkley over his rushing yards total. The Commanders have a bad rush defense. I think the Eagles are going to run the ball all game. Didn't necessarily want to go with that because, once again, if I think the Eagles are going to win this handedly, Saquon Barkley may not get as many carries in the fourth quarter. So I'm going a different route here. I will go Zach Ertz under 3.5 receptions. That is the Commanders' tight end. Zach Ertz under 3.5 receptions at -105. The Eagles have done a fantastic job defending tight ends this season. Arguably the best job defending tight ends this season, because if you look at fantasy points, they have allowed the fewest fantasy points to tight ends this season. Zach Ertz is averaging only 3.7 receptions per game, which is basically right at what his reception total is set at. So I think it's a great opportunity to take the under here. If he's averaging exactly what the set total is, but he's taken on the best defense when it comes to defending tight ends, that is an under to me. He is a little bit of a boom or bust player. He's hauled in 7 receptions against the Bears, but then he followed that up by catching just 1 pass the following week against the Giants. I think against this Eagles defense, it's much more likely that he has a bust performance than a boom performance. So Zach Ertz on Thursday night, under 3.5 receptions at -105. Number 6 player prop of the week. It is my first of 2 touchdown scores. I'm going 2 touchdown scores this week. And this one is kind of my more long shot one. It is Demarcus Robinson to score a touchdown for the Los Angeles Rams at 4-1. That is at DraftKings. I've mentioned earlier, DraftKings generally has the worst odds for scoring a touchdown. Not the case every single time. In this case, they actually, for this specific player, DraftKings, as of Wednesday night, has the best odds for Demarcus Robinson at 4-1. Most other books at around +320. I think Caesars +330. So DraftKings actually by far the best price if you want Robinson as of Wednesday night to score a touchdown at 4-1. So I love that price on a guy who is the clear number 3 receiver in Los Angeles. Obviously, the top 2 receivers are Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. I think that scares a lot of people from going to a Demarcus Robinson, but it's important to note that the Rams play a lot of 3 receiver sets. So even though he's the number 3 guy, he's on the field just as much, almost as much, as Nacua and Kupp. In fact, on Monday night, he played 83% of offensive snaps. Actually, he's played at least 83% of offensive snaps in 8 of 9 games this season. So some teams that play more 2 receiver sets, more sets with tight ends, the number 3 guy probably isn't going to play 83 or more offensive snaps. That is the case for Demarcus Robinson, though. So he's on the field a ton. He's already scored 5 touchdowns this season. He scored 2 touchdowns in back-to-back games in weeks 8 and 9. So he's scoring a ton of touchdowns, and now he gets to go up against a Patriots team who their secondary is top-heavy. So I think they're going to have to look to a Demarcus Robinson. Christian Gonzalez probably going to be on Puka Nacua. Their next guy is probably going to be on Cooper Kupp. I think Robinson, going up against a team that's very top-heavy in the secondary, I think he's going to be targeted a ton against the New England Patriots. So 4-1 odds for a guy who, 1, has 5 touchdowns, 2, is on the field for at least 83% of offensive plays, and 3, going up against a team that has a very good corner that will likely shadow Puka Nacua. That's going to open things up for the number 3 target and Demarcus Robinson. So 4-1 odds, I absolutely love that bet. We're going to Sunday Night Football, and we're going to go with Joe Burrow of the Bengals to go over 266.5 pass yards at -115. This lines up with the reason why I'm betting on the Bengals as a whole. I think we're going to see some regression from the Chargers defense. Let me name the quarterbacks who the Chargers, because let me take a step back. If you look at the Chargers right now, the hell is that? There's a cruise horn. I don't know if that got picked up on the microphone. It sounded like a boat out on the Hudson River is laying on the horn. Chargers defense, if you look at their numbers, extremely good. Opponent dropback EPA second. I think opponent dropback success rate second as well. Top 5 in opponent yards per pass attempt. So if you just look at the Chargers numbers, you think, oh, we got to fade Joe Burrow because they're doing a very good job stopping the pass. Let me name the quarterbacks the Chargers have played so far this season. Gardner Minshew, Bryce Young, Justin Fields, Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, Jameis Winston, Will Levis, and then they have played Patrick Mahomes and Kyler Murray. But still, that is 9 games that they've played, and 7 of the 9 games they played were against probably the 7 worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Minshew, Bryce Young, Justin Fields, Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, Jameis Winston, Will Levis. Ooh. So I think it's fair to say, even Chargers fans out there, I think it's fair to say your defense is going to see at least a little bit of regression. I don't want to say the Chargers defense is bad. They're certainly not bad. They're a good defense. But let's not start crowning them as the best defense in the NFL. I think we see some regression from their secondary. I think Joe Burrow is the guy to do it. The Bengals have been throwing the ball a ton. They've thrown the ball on 67.16% of plays over their last 3 games, second highest rate in the league. And he's averaging 267.2 passing yards per game. So he hits his season average of 267. We're laughing. Joe Burrow over 266.5 pass yards on Sunday Night Football. Number 4 player prop of the week. This is a guy I've bet on a handful of times already. It is my guy Kyle Pitts. I'll take him over 3.5 receptions at -139. The Broncos do a very good job of shutting down opposing receivers. So I don't expect Drake London or Darnell Mooney to have big games. I expect instead Kyle Pitts to have a big game because opposing tight ends have had big games against the Broncos this season. For example, Brock Bowers had 8 catches against them. Travis Kelce had 8 catches against them last week. Cade Otton had 7 catches against them earlier this season. So there have been plenty of examples of tight ends having big games in terms of receptions against the Broncos, and I think we're going to see a similar story here for Kyle Pitts. And the Falcons have shown that if other teams are going to take away Drake London and Darnell Mooney, they're not afraid to go to Kyle Pitts. They showed that in the latest game against the Buccaneers. That's exactly what happened. Kyle Pitts has also hauled in at least 4 receptions in 3 of his last 4 games. He has seen 5 targets in 3 of his last 4 games. So, he has been getting a lot more action the past handful of weeks as well. So, Kyle Pitts over 3.5 receptions at -139 against the Broncos. All right, this is my second touchdown score prop of the week. I don't know why I've only been doing 1 touchdown score. We got to make up some ground, so let's go with another one. This one's at +220 odds. It is Juwan Jennings of the 49ers +220 to score a touchdown against the Seattle Seahawks. He had played in games and had some good games earlier this season, but last week was the first week that he was healthy when Brandon Ayuk was not, and they very clearly started treating him like as if he was Brandon Ayuk. Last week against the Buccaneers was the first game where he was healthy and Brandon Ayuk was not, and he slotted in as the number 1 receiver. He played 91% of snaps. He saw 11 targets. He hauled in 7 receptions for 93 yards. Those are the numbers that Brandon Ayuk had when he was healthy. 91% of snaps, 11 targets, 7 receptions. Brandon Ayuk was not, especially with how he was playing this year, he still had shorter odds than +220 to score. So don't treat Juwan Jennings like he's Juwan Jennings this week. Treat him like he's Brandon Ayuk. Treat him like he's their number 1 receiver. Because if last week is any indication, he is. So I think there is an opportunity for us to take advantage of that before the market truly adjusts. And also the Seahawks secondary, not good. 21st in opponent dropback EPA. They allow 1.6 passing touchdowns per game, and the 49ers torched them through the air when they played against them in Seattle earlier this season. So Juwan Jennings to score a touchdown at +220. Let me just quickly actually let you know what sportsbook that was at, because I do like to do that for the touchdowns, because those do vary quite a bit in odds. Juwan Jennings, that was at Caesars, was at +220, the best price for Juwan Jennings. All right, top 2 player props of the week. I have a feeling this one might be a popular one. Sam Darnold to throw an interception, -115. The old Sam Darnold, and if you're a Vikings fan, you got to be a little bit nervous. The old Sam Darnold is starting to show. He's seeing ghosts. 3 interceptions last week, was it? 5 interceptions combined in the past 2 games. And a lot of those interceptions have been questionable at best. He's thrown to guys where you're like, did you see the defender because you threw it right at his numbers? Did you think you were playing for the other team? It's not good. Not good, Sam Darnold. And now he's taking on a Titans team that obviously has a good secondary. They have a defense that I'm a fan of. He's thrown an interception in 7 of his 9 games this season. -115 odds. Yeah, I'll take that bet. I think the Sam Darnold regression continues this week. I will bet on him to throw an interception at minus 115. My number one player prop for NFL Week 11. I don't know why I like to go with some weird ones for my number one player prop. I like to go a little niche. I'm gonna go Josh Allen over 6.5 rush attempts. And I have just attempts in the graphic. Let me switch that to rush attempts. Because if it was pass attempts, it would be easy. Josh Allen over 6.5 rush attempts at minus 139. You can instead go over 7.5. I think, I forget the book now, but there's a book out there that is 7.5 at like minus 105. Instead, I went over 6.5 at minus 139. Here's why. Josh Allen runs the ball way more against the Chiefs than any other team, and it's not even close. He averages 10.14 rush attempts against the Chiefs in 7 games against them in his career. That is, 3, 8, 9, 10. That's 4 clear of what we need him to rush for in this game. He's actually I don't think he's ever rushed fewer than 6 times against the Chiefs, ever. I think his lowest rushing attempt total against the Chiefs is 7. Next, and that's by far way more than any other team. The next closest is the Bengals. He has 8.5 rush attempts per game against them. We've also seen him take off with his legs more late in season, especially in a further increase again in the playoffs. I think it's basically the bigger the game, the more likely Josh Allen's to take off with his legs. And obviously every game against the Chiefs is big. He wants those wins. He's going to take matters into his own hands more often than he would a Week 7 game against the Raiders, a Week 10 game against the Dolphins. I love this bet. This is truly my number one. This might be my number one favorite player prop for the entire season. I'm going to repeat what I said. He has averaged 10.14 rush attempts against the Chiefs per game. He's never had fewer than 7. When he plays against the Chiefs, Josh Allen runs the football. We only need him to get to 7. I don't know if he can ladder quarterback rush attempts. Might be a great opportunity to ladder quarterback rush attempts. I'm going to see if I can do that on Sunday. So my number one player prop of the week, Josh Allen over 6.5 rush attempts at minus 139. There you go. I'm just going to quickly read through them here once again. Number 10, Anthony Richardson over 177.5 pass yards, minus 115. Russell Wilson over 29.5 pass attempts, minus 128. Devon Achane over 35.5 receiving yards, minus 115. Zach Ertz under 3.5 receptions at minus 105. Demarcus Robinson touchdown 4-1. Joe Burrow over 266.5 pass yards, minus 115. Kyle Pitts over 3.5 receptions, minus 139. Juwan Jennings touchdown plus 220. Sam Darnold interception, minus 115. And Josh Allen over 6.5 rush attempts, a minus 139. No DFS lineup for me this week, but I'll tell you right now. A quarterback that I like, if you really want a cheap option, I actually think Anthony Richardson might be a good call. Outside of Anthony Richardson, you could go Russell Wilson, or you could go Joe Burrow if you want a more expensive guy. Receiver, love Demarcus Robinson. Love Demarcus Robinson based on his snap count, based on touchdowns in recent games, based on the fact that I think he can attack the lack of depth in the Patriots secondary. I like Kyle Pitts as a tight end. There's been a lot of good tight end performances against the Broncos. I like Juwan Jennings as a receiver. He's being treated as a number one receiver in this 49ers offense. At least he was last week. If you want to pay up for A-Chain, I like him as a running back. I think he's actually overpriced when it comes to DFS. Other than that, I don't have any other running backs on this list. I like Joe Mixon against the Cowboys if you're doing a Monday night one. And the Bengals struggle to stop the run, so maybe J.K. Dobbins of the Chargers too. But there you have it. If you really want my DFS lineup, DM me on Twitter, and I'll send you a screenshot once I get it made. But I'm going to wait a little bit later in the week to do that. All right, thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe to the Bacon Bets podcast on YouTube. Rate and review the audio version of this podcast. Leave a comment down below with any questions that you have you want me to answer on the podcast, or maybe your favorite player prop for the week. Gamble or bless. I'll talk to you all next week for the road to 270 do. Talk to you then.